안녕하세요.
Dawn was breaking in Seoul, and the towering Kang Group building gleamed under the first rays of sunlight. Inside the building, the frantic morning rhythm took over as employees hurried to their posts. Lee So-yoon, holding a stack of documents, struggled to balance a hot cup of coffee while rushing to deliver urgent reports. She couldn't afford to make a mistake working as an assistant secretary. She knew that a single slip-up could cost her job. Then, as she turned hastily around a corridor, she collided violently with a tall and elegant man, sending papers flying and spilling coffee all over his expensive suit. A gasp of horror echoed through the hallway as So-yoon's eyes traveled up to the man's face. The silence that followed was deafening. She blinked, recognizing Kang Ji-hoon, the very CEO of the company. He looked down at the coffee stain with an unreadable expression. His impeccable suit was ruined. The surrounding employees held their breath, waiting for an explosion of anger. Ji-hoon lifted his gaze to So-yoon, who was already bowing repeatedly in a desperate apology. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. I'll pay for the damage." She hurried to gather the scattered papers, avoiding his piercing gaze. Instead of losing his temper, Ji-hoon let out a long sigh, observing the woman with curiosity. Unlike many who were intimidated by his presence, she seemed more distressed about her mistake than fearful of who he was. The corner of his mouth almost twitched into an involuntary smirk. "Pay for the damage? Do you have any idea how much this suit costs?" His voice was firm but not hostile. So-yoon hesitated. No, she had no idea, but she assumed the price far exceeded her monthly salary. Ji-hoon noticed her anxious expression and, to everyone's surprise, took off his jacket and casually tossed it aside. "Forget it. Just watch where you're going next time." He walked away, leaving So-yoon speechless and the other employees murmuring. The billionaire CEO, known for his cold demeanor, had simply let a mistake slide on that many believed to be unforgivable. But as Ji-hoon distanced himself, he couldn't resist a final discreet glance at the young woman. There was something about her that intrigued him more than he was willing to admit. And so, unknowingly, an unexpected fate began to unfold between them. The days that followed were marked by a subtle tension between Kang Ji-hoon and Lee So-yoon. He, accustomed to being treated with extreme professionalism and distance, found himself noticing the young assistant's presence more than he cared to admit. As for So-yoon, a mix of nervousness and fascination filled her every time she had to interact with him. Despite the coffee incident, Ji-hoon hadn't punished her, which in itself was a great mystery within Kang Group. That evening, a corporate event filled with influential businessmen was taking place at a luxurious hotel in downtown Seoul. All key employees were required to attend, including So-yoon, who felt completely out of place in an environment of fine suits and formal conversations. She tried to remain discreet, but everything changed when, by an unfortunate coincidence, she ended up trapped inside an elevator with none other than the CEO himself. "This can't be happening," So-yoon murmured, staring at Ji-hoon as she realized they were alone in the confined space. Ji-hoon pressed the emergency button, but the lights flickered, and the communication system didn't respond. "Looks like we're stuck." His voice was calm, but So-yoon could sense a slight annoyance in him. "This is just a nightmare, I'm sure of it," So-yoon whispered to herself, taking a deep breath. Being trapped in an elevator was already bad enough. Being trapped with her cold and unreachable boss was simply terrifying. Ji-hoon leaned against the elevator wall, observing her with curiosity. "You're always so nervous around me." So-yoon's eyes widened, and she quickly defended herself. "That's not true. It's just that, well, you're the CEO." Ji-hoon let out a short, amused snort. "Does that mean I'm a monster?" She hesitated before responding. "No, but you have this aura, like you could destroy someone's life with a single word." He raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by her blunt answer. "Interesting." For a few moments, silence settled between them. Ji-hoon had never met someone who spoke to him like that. So-yoon wasn't flattering him, nor was she trying to impress him. She was simply saying what she thought. For the first time in a long while, he felt something different. The sound of an alert interrupted both of their thoughts. The elevator resumed functioning, and within seconds, the doors slid open. So-yoon rushed out, her heart pounding. But before she could get far, she heard Ji-hoon call her name. Lee So-yoon. She turned around slowly, surprised to see a softer expression on his face. "I'll remember what you said." Not entirely sure what he meant, So-yoon simply nodded and hurried away. Little did she know that from that moment on, Ji-hoon wouldn't be able to get her out of his mind. In the days following the elevator incident, Ji-hoon found himself, against his own will, watching So-yoon more than before. The innocent sparkle in her eyes, her clumsy way of juggling 1,000 tasks at once, and her unpretentious sincerity intrigued him. No matter how much he tried to ignore it, he felt increasingly drawn to this unlikely woman. The problem was that the world around him was beginning to notice too. The rumors in the company started as scurious glances, hushed conversations in the hallways. The idea that the all-powerful Kang Ji-hoon could be interested in a mere employee was so absurd that, at first, no one believed it. But as he began to show an unusual amount of attention to So-yoon, calling her more frequently, engaging in conversations slightly longer than necessary, the gossip became uncontrollable. And that was how the news reached the ears of the one man Ji-hoon feared disappointing the most, his father, Kang Hyun-woo. That evening, Ji-hoon was summoned to a private dinner at the family's luxurious mansion. The atmosphere there had always been heavy with expectations and demands. Sitting at the impeccably set table, he waited as his father put down his utensils and fixed him with a cold stare. "I've been hearing some troubling things, Ji-hoon." Hyun-woo spoke slowly. "Tell me it's a mistake." Ji-hoon kept his expression unreadable. "What exactly are you referring to?" The older man sighed, as if dealing with a stubborn child. "An employee? Really, Ji-hoon? I don't need to remind you that your marriage to Cha Yuna is already being negotiated. This is the best strategy for the future of the company. A Kang Group heir cannot entangle himself with just anyone." Ji-hoon felt his jaw tighten. He knew this day would come, but hearing those words still stirred a silent rebellion within him. "With all due respect, father, my marriage is not a business deal." Hyun-woo smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Maybe not to you, but to this family, everything is business." Ji-hoon clenched his fists under the table. He knew his father wouldn't back down easily. He knew this was just the beginning. The next morning, as he stepped into the company, he sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The whispers grew louder as he walked through the corridors toward his office. So-yoon was not at her desk, and his expression darkened when he saw a warning letter sitting there. He didn't need to ask to know that his father had already begun to act. Kang Ji-hoon stared at the warning letter on So-yoon's desk, feeling the anger swell inside him. He didn't need confirmation to know that his father was behind this. His hands clenched into fists as he struggled to contain his fury. Since childhood, he had learned that any sign of weakness could be used against him. But now, this was a battle he was not willing to lose. So-yoon entered the room hesitantly, immediately noticing the letter he was holding. Her eyes widened, and she lowered her head. I didn't mean to cause trouble." Her voice carried a guilty tone. Ji-hoon stood up, walking toward her with a determined gaze. "You didn't cause trouble." His voice was firm. "This is a power game, and I won't allow them to hurt you for something that is my responsibility." So-yoon lifted her eyes, confused. "I'm just an employee, Mr. Kang. I'm not important enough for you to take a risk." Ji-hoon let out a short, humorless laugh. "I disagree." She was left speechless. The intensity in his eyes made her heart race in a way she had never felt before. But before she could say anything, Ji-hoon turned his attention toward the door. "Let's go." So-yoon blinked, surprised. "Where?" He grabbed his suit jacket and opened the door, motioning for her to follow. "To settle this the right way." So-yoon followed Ji-hoon to the company's executive boardroom, where the board members and his father were gathered. The atmosphere was cold and intimidating, but Ji-hoon didn't hesitate as he pushed the doors open and strode in with confidence. His father looked at him, visibly displeased by his presence. "Ji-hoon, this is an internal company matter. I don't believe you should be here." Ji-hoon crossed his arms, meeting his father's gaze head-on. "When an employee is punished without cause, it is my duty to intervene." Hyun-woo narrowed his eyes. Your emotions are clouding your judgment. Don't you see that this woman could ruin your reputation? Jae-hoon laughed, but his expression was cold. My reputation is built on my work, not on rumors. If this is a problem for the board, then I will temporarily step down from Kang Group. A murmur spread through the room. His father remained silent for a few moments before letting out a heavy sigh. Do you really think you can afford to act this way? Jae-hoon looked straight into his father's eyes. I think it's time I start making my own decisions. Without waiting for a response, he took the warning letter from the table and tore it in front of everyone. Then, he turned to So-yoon and motioned for her to follow him. As they walked out together, So-yoon felt a mix of fear and admiration. Kang Ji-hoon was willing to face everything for her, but that also meant the war against his family was only just beginning. The days following Ji-hoon's decision were a whirlwind. News of his temporary withdrawal from Kang Group spread quickly, causing an uproar both within the company and in the media. Reporters wanted to know why the heir to one of the country's largest business empires had made such a drastic decision. But more than that, all eyes were now on So-yoon, who suddenly found herself at the center of a storm. She tried to maintain her routine, but it was impossible to ignore the suspicious glances and whispered conversations around her. Ji-hoon, on the other hand, seemed indifferent to it all, standing firmly by her side. Yet So-yoon knew he was fighting invisible battles behind the scenes. That night, Ji-hoon took her to a private restaurant. As dinner was served, he reached for her hand across the table and looked directly into her eyes. I know all of this has been difficult for you, So-yoon, but I need to know, do you still want to stay by my side? So-yoon felt her heart tighten. His words were simple, but carried so much weight. She understood the gravity of the decision they were making. I'm scared, Ji-hoon. Her voice was hesitant. Not for myself, but for you. I know how much this company means to you, how hard you fought to be where you are. And now, all of that is being threatened because of me. Ji-hoon tightened his grip on her hand. Don't say that. You're not the problem, So-yoon. The problem is this system that thinks it can decide who we are allowed to love. I've already made my decision. I want you in my life. So-yoon felt tears welling up in her eyes. No matter how much she tried to resist, her heart already belonged to him. Then, let's fight together. Her voice came out stronger. But promise me that if things get too difficult, you won't hurt yourself because of me. Ji-hoon smiled, a smile full of tenderness. I promise, but know this: nothing will make me give up on you. As his words lingered between them, a man sitting a few tables away picked up his phone and sent a message. Kang Hyun-woo would soon learn that his son had not given up. And this time, he would not sit idly by. The next day, So-yoon received an unexpected call. Her phone rang non-stop, and when she finally answered, the director's voice was harsh and direct. Miss Lee, you need to report to the office immediately. There is an urgent matter we need to discuss. Her heart pounded. Something was wrong. But as she arrived at the building, she found Ji-hoon waiting for her at the entrance. His expression was serious. My father has set something up, I know it. She gripped his hand tightly. Then, we'll face it together. And together, they stepped through the company's doors, ready to confront whatever awaited them. So-yoon and Ji-hoon entered the Kang Group's boardroom hand in hand, facing the stern gazes of the board members. At the head of the table, Kang Hyun-woo awaited them with a cold, calculating expression. So, you finally decided to show up. The patriarch crossed his arms. So-yoon, you were called here because your presence in this company is a problem. The scandal you've caused is affecting our business. A chill ran down So-yoon's spine, but Ji-hoon tightened his grip on her hand, giving her strength. The problem isn't So-yoon, father. The problem is this outdated mentality that stops you from accepting that I've made my decision. I love her, and nothing you do will change that. Hyun-woo let out a humorless laugh. Love doesn't sustain an empire. Ji-hoon. Jae-hoon stood his ground. But trust does, and I know I can make this company grow without sacrificing my happiness. If my position here depends on abandoning So-yoon, then I officially resign from my post. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Ji-hoon's departure could destabilize investments, and Hyunwoo knew it. The patriarch clenched his fists. Realizing that his son was willing to risk everything, he let out a weary sigh. Are you really willing to lose everything for her? Ji-hoon looked at So-yoon, and a soft smile appeared on his lips. I've already gained everything by having her by my side. The room fell silent. Hyunwoo rubbed his temples, defeated. Do whatever you want, but know that if you fail, there won't be another chance. Ji-hoon simply nodded, pulling So-yoon out of the room. As they stepped outside the building, he stopped, looked into her eyes, and held her hands gently. Now, we can live our lives without restrictions. So-yoon, will you marry me? Tears streamed down So-yoon's face as she nodded, her smile radiant. The spring sun bathed the garden of the home Ji-hoon and So-yoon had built together. They had carved out their own path, founded a new company, and against all odds, they had thrived. Ji-hoon had proven that love and success could coexist. On the veranda, So-yoon cradled a baby in her arms. Ji-hoon approached, wrapping his arms around her from behind and pressing a gentle kiss to her hair. Our little Hana is growing so fast. He gazed at their sleeping daughter. So-yoon smiled, leaning into him. And our family is too. Ji-hoon looked at her curiously. What do you mean? She took his hand and placed it over her stomach. His eyes widened before a huge grin spread across his face. Really? Another baby? So-yoon nodded, laughing. Ji-hoon lifted her into the air, spinning her around in joy, his laughter mixing with hers. At last, they had everything they had ever wanted: love, a family, and a bright future ahead. And this time, nothing and no one could ever tear them apart.